to my channel. Today I'm going to bring you guys a really delicious breakfast. Now for those of you that have chickens and you have the problem that we all have every spring and summer, is just so many eggs coming into the kitchen that you don't know what to do with, you're going to absolutely love this recipe. I kind of did a little tweak to my breakfast egg bacon quiche last summer, and I had made the regular amount of the quiche with the 5 eggs and the 1.5 cups of milk and the cheese and everything. And I was looking at it and I thought, you know, I could probably put so many more eggs in this quiche mixture. And so I just kept adding eggs, and I think I ended up adding about 14 eggs. And I had a really deep dish Pyrex. Don't know if it would be considered a pie dish, but it was a big round Pyrex glass baking dish, and it had real tall sides. So I thought, you know, I'm just going to make a double recipe, or a recipe that would make 2 crusts, the top and the bottom crust, and I would just make as big of a crust as I could. I'd put it into that round Pyrex, and I would add the mixture and see what happened, and it cooked it beautifully. And it was big, tall pieces of quiche because there was so many eggs, but I was able to get in you know, over a dozen eggs. You could probably even add 16 eggs, I'm guessing, because I mean, it just felt like I could keep adding eggs as long as my casserole could hold it. So that was a really fun discovery, to get rid of eggs. And then it was, because it's just Hans and I, it was breakfast for the entire week. He would just cut slabs off of it and warm it up in the toaster oven, and we were good to go. So I am going to, at first I would, because everybody keeps asking me to make my quiche recipe, to make a tutorial out of it, and I was just going to make my regular recipe, but then I thought, no, I'm going to go ahead and make this 14 egg quiche, and on the blog post I'll break it down to where it would just be like a 9-inch pie plate that would be 5 or 6 eggs for those of you that want a smaller quiche. So it'll be both options there. So if you guys don't have a food processor and you're making pie crusts, you really need to get one. You need to get one for just everything that it does. They're amazing, but they work wonderfully for pie crust. So in this tutorial I am going to make my pie crust using a food processor to show you how it's done. But if you don't have one and you are just going to make it by hand, then you can go ahead and check out my recipe for my homemade apple pie with the flaky crust. I do it all by hand there, so you can hop over there and see, you know, how I do it there. This is a little bit different of a recipe. In that one I use palm fruit shortening, and in this one I'm going to use butter. But if you want the technique with the pastry blender, you can see it over there in that tutorial. So today we're going to make the whole thing in the food processor. I'm going to make a 2 crust recipe. We're going to make the dough, and then we're going to pop it in the fridge and let it chill. I usually like it to chill for about 45 minutes to an hour. I don't have an hour today, but it'll be at least 30 minutes while we make the mixture, the quiche mixture itself. So we're going to go ahead and start with that. This is just, I'm just going to real quick add the flour and a little bit of sugar and some salt into the bowl of the food processor. So if you want the printable recipe, go ahead and click the link below. It'll take you to my blog, and you can get the full printable recipe there with all the amounts. I'm not going to give you the amounts of everything. This is more just the technique. So I'm going to get started with the dry ingredients for the crust. Okay, so that's done. We're just going to pop this onto the base of my food processor, and I'm going to stick the lid on it and set it aside for a second. Now I'm going to grab me a knife, and because this is a 2 crust recipe, it calls for a full cup of butter. So this butter is hard. I just took it out of the refrigerator. You want your butter to be hard. You don't want it to be melting everywhere. So I When I do it by hand, that's why I got the cheese grater out. I grate my batter with a cheese grater and it goes into the crust and I can mix it very quickly. But since I'm doing the food processor, I don't need the cheese grater. So if I'm using a food processor, I just cut this batter into chunks that would fit down the hole. So the hole is probably about this big. So probably, probably a chunk about this size. So I'm just gonna cut this real quick and then we'll mix it up in the food processor. Okay, so the batter's all chunked, and now all we're gonna do is I'll pulse it, and I'm just gonna drop the cubes down the chute here, and it'll just make them into tiny little particles, just exactly what you want for a pie crust. I'm not just gonna turn it on, I just want to kind of pulse it. Alright, so I'm just gonna kind of shot some out there in the beginning. I'm just going to take a look at it and make sure that everything is broken up really, really small. Actually, I'll bring the camera in so you can see what you're looking for. See, now here's a little bit big of a piece. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'm going to pulse it a few more times, and then I'll bring the camera close and show you guys. Alright, as you can see, it's just like little fine, just almost like coarse cornmeal. You can't even find the butter really anymore. So this is exactly what you're looking for. So as you can see, doing this by hand, it takes a little while to get it looking like this with a pastry blender. But it's so quick with a food processor. Okay, now that the butter is broken up and the flour mixture is ready to go, I'm going to add ice water. Now I always put about 2 ice cubes in a bunch of water, maybe about 10 minutes before I'm going to make my crust. You just want everything to be cold. You want the butter to be cold, you want the water to be cold. You don't want the dough to be soft and sticky, melting butter. You just want everything really cold, and that's why when I get done with this, I wrap it in saran wrap and I put it in the refrigerator so that when you're rolling it out, it's just a nice chilled piece of dough. That's really key when you're making a pie crust. I did a long time ago when I very first started making pie crusts, I didn't realize that, and my dough would be more warm and I would roll it out and it would stick to the counter, and then when I'd get it rolled into a perfect circle, I'd try to pull it up off the counter and it would stick, and it was just a nightmare. And so when I discovered that everything needs to be really cold, now making pie crusts is really super easy. A lot of people say, like, I don't know how to make pie crusts, they look so hard, and the key is that everything is cold. And if you do that, you'll have a super easy time, and it's really super rewarding. So I'm going to fish out the ice cube. And I'm just going to pulse it again. I'm not just going to let it run, because you just want to have it run to mix the dough, get it all into a ball of dough. You don't want to mix it any more than that, because overworking your dough is going to result in a really tough crust. If you want it flaky and tender, you want to do the least amount of mixing as possible. So I'll just, pour some water and pulse it, take a look at it, do it again. Don't just add the water slowly, because you can keep adding water, but you can't take it out if you put too much. Then you're going to have to keep adding flour, and then it's just going to compromise the dough completely. So add the water slowly, and once all of it comes to a ball and it's just, just a ball in there and it's just whipping a ball around, you're done. Just stop. Don't mix it anymore. I think I'm going to stop, and I'm going to bring the camera up along the side of the bowl, so hopefully maybe you guys can see as it comes together. So you can see that I added just a little bit more water. I think you can see that. So I'm going to pulse it. We're just about there, because this is starting to really clump up together. Do you see how it's wanting to form a ball? Now, actually, I'm going to feel it. I'm going to pulse it maybe 1 or 2 more times, and then I'll feel it and see, and it might be ready. Yeah, I think so. See, that came together in a really nice ball. So I'm done adding water. Okay, so if you guys have made a pie crust just in a bowl with a pastry blender, you'll see just how easy and how quick it is. One thing that I love to do, if I'm going to make this dirty, dirty this whole thing, I will go ahead and make 3 different recipes of a double crust recipe. And so that gives me like 6 single crusts, and I'll wrap them individually in saran wrap and put them in my freezer, and they store for quite a few months, and they're just great. And the night before, if I'm going to make a quiche in the morning, I'll just go get one out of the freezer, stick it in the refrigerator, and then in the morning it's ready to roll out and make a quiche. And you can have a quiche in, no time at all when you've got pie crust in your freezer. So that's a great make-ahead tip. But I just love making them in this because it's so quick and so easy. I wish you guys could feel this. You would be like, wow, that is amazing soft dough. I'm going to bring it up. I don't know if I mean, you can just tell that's just such soft workable dough, but it's not sticky. It's not sticky at all on my hands. So this is perfect. So I'm going to take this, wrap it in saran wrap, and we will stick it in the refrigerator and get working on the filling for the quiche. And then this will have had time to really get super chilled, and then we'll roll it out and put everything together. Okay, so now we are going to make our filling while the dough is in the freezer. We have a lot of really good just farmhouse ingredients. We've got some bacon and some green onions, some farm fresh eggs, cheese, milk, salt and pepper, and then we'll have a little bit more flour that I'm going to mix in the cheese. But that is what makes up your quiche recipe. Now there are some variations that you can do to this. I have omitted the bacon, and I have cooked sausage, breakfast sausage, and put that in. I've done the little breakfast sausage links where I've cut them in little round slices and put that in. Instead of green onions, I have, during the summer when we have a ton of the Ortega chilies that are coming out of the garden, I will use different kinds of chilies in here. And the cheeses, you can vary the cheeses, of course. I just like this cheddar cheese, white cheddar cheese. But, if you want like more of a rich kind of a quiche that a lot of times is served at lunch or dinner, you can have like a Swiss cheese with bacon and like spinach, just, whatever sounds good to you. But I just like, for a breakfast, I just like the basic staple farmhouse ingredients. So to start with, I'm going to fry up the bacon, and to make this really easy, I just, while it's still, I took it out of the freezer and it was defrosting. We cure our own bacon, but I don't know why I had this bacon in my freezer, because normally we have home raised bacon. But I had this one, so I figured I'd use it up. And when it was still pretty, it's still pretty solid. I mean, it's defrosted, but it hasn't been sitting on the counter for very long, so I'm going to real easily be able to just cut this way. And then as it cooks, I can just take it out with a slotted spoon, and it's just already, instead of having to cook it and then crumble it, it's already ready to go. Like, these little tiny pieces will be the perfect size to go in the quiche. I won't have to, deal with big long strips of bacon and then crumble it in the end anyway. So I am just going to put it in my skillet, and I'll let it be cooking while we're mixing the rest of the ingredients. So kind of pull them apart just a little bit as you're putting them in the pot, or else they'll start just cooking together in a big lump. And then I'm just going to put it on medium heat, because I don't want to have to, just stand over it watching it. I want to work on my other ingredients. So I'll just cook it a little slower, so it won't need as much maintenance. Alright, so we'll just Turn it on to a medium. So we're going to go ahead and crack the eggs. So I've got 14 eggs. I actually think I could probably fit 16, but I think we'll just do 14 today. So we're going to crack those into a bowl and beat it up. So now into the eggs we're going to pour our milk. We're going to add our salt. And we're going to add our pepper. Okay, we're just going to mix it up really, really well. So in goes the green onions, or Ortegas, or whatever it is that you're using. Okay, so we're going to check the bacon now. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these. These are a screen that you can just set right on top, and it keeps all the splattering inside. I mean, you know, you still have some splattering, but it really cuts down. It's a lot cleaner of a job. And a lot of times I'll turn the flame off before I pick this up, and I'll stir it, and then I'll put it back down, and then I'll turn the flame back on again. It just makes for such a cleaner cook. Ooh, it's looking good. Smells, bacon always smells so delicious. Okay, so we're going to get the bacon out of the bacon fat and just let it drain a little bit. I've just got a glass dish, not a plastic one, it'll melt. A glass dish with several napkins on top, or paper towels, and just lay them out on there. So go ahead and just dab it off with a napkin, and then we're not going to put this in the egg mixture just yet. We're going to put it in at the end, as well as the cheese. So this is done. We're going to set this aside, set these aside, and we're going to go ahead and roll out the dough, get it into the dish, and then we'll mix these in, mix it all together, and pour it in and stick it in the oven. So we're getting close to being done. Okay, so the next step is we're going to get the crust rolled out and into the pie dish. So if you make the full recipe that you'll find on my printable recipe, it actually is a 2-crust recipe. So if you're making like an apple pie, it would be the bottom and the top crust. But since a quiche is only a bottom crust, we're going to divide this right in half. You can wrap this back in saran wrap, maybe put it in a bag, and then you can keep it in your freezer for the next time you want to make a quiche. Like I was saying, you know, I keep them stored in my freezer. So maybe the next time you want to make one, or you want to make a pie that's just a bottom crust, then go ahead and take it out the night before, stick it in your refrigerator, and it'll be ready for you in the morning. So this can be a very quick breakfast, actually, if you pre-do a few things the day before. Like if this had been made, if the bacon had been fried, and it would just be a matter of rolling it out and mixing the eggs and milk and spices together and putting it in. So you could actually have this breakfast made in under, 10 or 15 minutes. So a quiche for breakfast is actually a pretty time-saving meal if you have prepared everything ahead of time. So I want to show you guys the pie dishes that I was talking about. This is your basic pie dish, just your 9-inch pie dish. You can see it's just, very, very narrow. And this is what would hold about a 5-egg quiche. But this one, this Pyrex, and these will be linked. Both of these dishes will be linked in my blog post. The same, you'll find printable recipe there, but you'll also find a link for all the tools, the rolling pin, the thing to put on top of the bacon, all of that. That will be linked in my blog post. But this is so much deeper than this one. And this can hold 14 to 16 eggs. So that's why I love this, because when you've got a glut of eggs coming in the spring and in the summertime, it is great to get rid of 14 eggs. And I'm sure all of you that have chickens are very heartily agreeing with me right now. So it tends to be a problem how many eggs you get. So I'm just going to divide this in half. And if you, because this is so much bigger than the 9-inch, it'll still be enough dough for it. Just, you'll have to roll it just a little bit thinner to get it, you know, just a little bit of a bigger circle to fit this. So I am going to just set this aside for now, but I'll eventually rewrap it really nice, double wrap it, and get it into the freezer. Now, I do like to butter my dish with some butter, because butter makes everything better, and just make it even more flaky. So I do not butter the top rim, because when I bring my crust up and I crimp it along the edges, I want it to be able to hang on to the rim and not slide back down. So I do not put any butter on the top, just so that it can hang on. Alright, so I'll bring you guys in a little bit just so you can see. Now, if you have viewed my apple pie tutorial, it's pretty much what I'm going to say again. But when you make a pie crust, a lot of people have a hard time keeping it in a perfect circle. And then when you put your pie dish and you put it into the pie dish, it's short on one side and not, you know, too long on the other side. So if you start out with a perfect piece of dough, I mean a perfectly round piece of dough, and it's just flattened just a little bit, and then lay your rolling pin right in the center and just roll up to the 12 o'clock, and then roll over to the 3 o'clock, and then roll down to the 6 o'clock position, and then back to the middle and 9 o'clock. Then that is going to keep this in a perfectly round circle. And if you just keep doing that over and over and over, it will just get bigger and bigger, and it will stay in a perfectly round circle. Now, as this gets bigger, it's going to be more like a 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4, 6, 8, 10, and back to 12, just because it's getting bigger. But right now, because it's so small, you're just going to do, you know, it in 4 motions. So make sure that this is not sticking to the counter. Every once in a while, just do this and lay it back down, you know, maybe flip it over so there's a little bit of flour, you know, on the top. And then we're just going to keep going in that motion up to the 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And you know, keeping it in mind like it's a clock, if it starts getting, you can see very quickly something's getting, you know, crooked, or it's not staying a perfect circle, and then you can kind of stop and work with that area. Like if this is not looking right, then just keep rolling in that area until it looks right again, and you can get pretty close to a perfect circle doing it this way. And resist the urge to really like press down and like try and get it flat super fast. Just take the time. See, now just take the time to just keep rolling it until it's thinner and thinner and thinner. You don't just want to press down and try and do it in just a few rolls. As you can see, this is getting a lot bigger, and so I'm going to need to start, you know, doing it more at that 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 mark. So I'm just going to keep rolling it out and until I think that it's big enough to fit into my pie dish. Now right here I can see this is not a perfect circle, so I can start to maybe work that area, and I was able to get that perfect circle again. And you know, this is lacking a little bit right here, so I'll just come over and I'm going to want to pick it up to make sure it's not sticking. See how beautiful that dough is when it's cold? I used to have such a hard time. It would just stick to the counter and it would break. I mean, this is really, really nice dough to work with. It's not cracking or breaking or flaking or anything. So the trick is in using cold butter, ice water, keeping it in the fridge until the very last minute, you know, working minimally with it, like not over processing it to make it tough and dry. And then, you know, just rolling it the way I'm showing you. And it just kind of takes the mystery out of a pie crust. Now, the way you know if it's, I got a little bit off right there, so I'm going to kind of work it. The way you know if your dough is big enough is to grab your pie dish that it's going to go into and set it on top. Now, you can tell that it would not be big enough to go inside and come out, and then you want it to be able to fit inside and then go up the sides and then come out and have about this much hanging over, because you're going to take that's hanging over and you're going to fold it under and then you're going to crimp it to the edge. So right now, if I was to lay this inside of here, it would probably just go to right here. It wouldn't leave me any room to crimp it, so I need to keep rolling it. Now, like I said before, resist the urge to press too hard, because if you press too hard, it's getting thin. It'll smear it to the counter and it'll just rip a hole in it. It's better to just go slow and have a perfect crust, because if you tear it, you're going to have to start over, and then what's going to happen is it's going to be even that much more. You're working the dough and it's just going to make the dough tougher. You don't want to keep messing up and putting it back in a ball and starting over. I mean, if you really are having a hard time with a crust, maybe you should make a batch of it and just know that it's a practice batch, and that it's probably going to be tough, and it's more to teach you how to roll it out, and you can just practice like it's Play-Doh or something. But if you want a really tender, flaky crust, you don't want to keep putting it back in a ball and starting over. So this is looking really big. You can tell that if I was to turn this upside down, look how much extra dough there is. There's going to be enough dough. I'm going to have to actually trim it down. There's so much dough here. So this is definitely big enough to go ahead and transfer it into the pie dish. Okay, there's a really simple trick on getting this off the counter and centered perfectly into your pie dish. I've seen a lot of different ideas. I've watched people where they roll it up on their thing and they try to roll it, and then they lay this on top of their pie dish and try to unroll it, and I never could get it to work. So if you just take this and just fold it in half, just make sure you don't press anything down. Fold it in half again, and then lift it up off the counter. Just don't squeeze this, or else you're not going to be able to get it back apart. Now, we'll put our dish here. Now, do you see this point right here? You're going to set it in the middle of your dish, just like that. And then you're going to lay this down in your dish. Okay, so just set it down in your dish like that, and then begin to unfold it. Now, if this is more than halfway in the middle, you need to position it so that this fold is right down the middle of your pie plate, so that when you unfold this, it will be perfectly centered. See, as you unfold it. Now I'm going to turn this. Do you see how the dough is overlapping? But it's pretty you know, there's some excess, you know, on one side, but it doesn't have to be perfect, but like it has to have enough on hanging over to where I can roll it and then I can crimp it. So as long as you have enough dough hanging over all the way around, then you're good. So begin to you press it down lightly. You don't want to do it and then poke a finger through it. You want to, like, you'll have to pick this up and, let's see, you'll have to pick this up and just kind of press it, and then pick this up and press it against the sides, just so that this is flush up against the pie plate and there's no air bubbles between the crust and the pie plate. See, there's a whole air bubble all along, so I'm just getting rid of that air bubble. Alright, so I'm just going to go along the bottom and just make sure that it's, you know, all snug up against the pie plate. Along the sides. Alright. Now, this is pretty even all the way around. How much excess I have. Oh, this kind of broke right here. I'm going to mend it. This is the only spot that it's not even, so I'm actually going to trim this off. Let's see, where is it? Right here. This is a little much, and if I need any dough to repair this, then I'll have it right here. Oh, this is a little bit long as well. So if you look at this, this is pretty much even all the way around how much is hanging over the edge. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to fold it under and crimp it now. So you just take it and you just fold it under and you make it pretty much even with this rim. You fold over however much dough you need to fold over to make it even. You just go all the way around. Just kind of rolling it under. Taking the cut edge, the end edge or the cut edge, and just rolling it under. And you know, the more of these you make, the easier this will get. It'll just be like second nature to do this. I used to not be able to do it very well, but now it's like so easy because I've done it so many times. Now I see it starting to tear a little bit right here. So I'm actually going to take some of this leftover dough and just stick it underneath. So that dough's great to have if you need to repair anything. It's actually pretty amazing if you make a pie crust and you don't have to repair anything. This is very, very thin right here, I'm feeling like. So I am going to just kind of smush a little bit up and stick it underneath. No one will ever see it. It's underneath. And it just helps thicken that up. I'm going to do the same thing right here. All right. Now, you can take your two fingers and you can just set them here. And you can take this one, you can kind of press down very lightly and then pinch your finger. And kind of like think about like kind of attaching it. You're attaching it to the rim so that it doesn't slide back in. So it's basically, and if you press down too much, you're going to press this all the way down to the glass. So if you notice that you see the glass dish through here, just kind of plump it up again. but you're basically just taking these fingers and just setting them here. You're setting this finger in between, and then you're just pinching this finger. See, now I can see the glass through there. So I'm going to kind of just push up dough so that I don't see the glass. So I'm going to go back, and anywhere I can see the glass dish, I'm going to just kind of repair it. Alright, that is a pretty beautiful pie crust, and it's really not as hard as people think. A lot of people will just take a fork and smash it down because they don't know how to do this, but it's just pinching, it's just taking this, setting this in between, and just doing this motion all the way around. Okay, so now we're going to finish mixing up the filling and get it in here. I'm going to go preheat the oven and it can be preheating while we're finishing putting this together. So we're on the home stretch. I don't know if I mentioned it when I said to set this all aside until after we'd rolled out the crust. It is best to keep your cheese in the refrigerator, because if it's sitting out for too long, it's going to get a little soft and, you know, be a little difficult to mix together. What I mean is, to keep this from clumping up in your quiche, I put about 2 tablespoons of flour in the cheese, and then I just kind of mix it together with my hands. That way it keeps the cheese, each piece of cheese is coated, and it will keep it from all clumping together in your quiche. So if you had this sitting out on the counter for very long, it might be difficult to do this, because especially on a summer day, if it's warm and starting to melt in your bowl. So we've got our eggs, and we're just going to add the eggs and the cheese and the bacon all together and pour it in the crust. And then I preheated the oven to 325. I like it a little bit lower because it just cooks it slower and it keeps your crust from browning too much. So that's preheating, and we'll just mix all these up. Alright, so that's everything that's going into it, and now we're just going to pour it into our pie dish. And I find that when I cook this in the oven, it is best to set this on a cookie sheet to just get easier to take in and out. I do that with all of my pies, because getting down underneath it and getting it out of the oven without breaking the crust, that's just kind of hard. And so I like to set this whole thing on a cookie sheet before it goes into the oven, just so that I can grab the cookie sheet and not my actual pie dish. So it's just going to be so much easier to carry it like this than trying to carry it and not disturb your crust. So this is going to take anywhere from 45 minutes, 55 minutes, maybe even an hour, but I start checking it around 45 minutes for doneness. And you can press down on it and you can feel that it's solid and that it's, you know, springs back. I like this. I have a knife. You could use a butter knife, and I'll just go in the middle, and you can tell it just cuts down nicely, and it's just solid. You can tell when it's done. And then let's see. I don't think you don't have to wait to eat it. It just, you can eat it right away. It's not like it doesn't need to rest or anything. But if you start looking at this at around the 25-30 minute mark, if this is getting too browned, then cut little strips of foil and lay it around the edges, and that will keep the crust from browning anymore. It'll continue cooking it, but it won't get any browner. Or if you have one of those pie, actually I'm going to go get it and I'll show you what it is. Alright, this is like to protect your crust. I'll bring it up. I'll link this in my blog post as well. And you can just set this right on top, and this strip would do the same thing as foil would do. It would protect the crust underneath it from getting any browner. But if you don't have one of these, you can just use strips of foil. So what I would do, I wouldn't do it now because this is just soft and it would ruin my crust. And I don't need to protect my crust right now. I mean, it needs to get browned. So, but like if I go out in 30 minutes and this is browned and it's firm to where, you know, this isn't going to ruin it, and I want to keep it from getting any browner, I would just lay this right on the top like that, and it would protect the crust. So these are really handy. And if you don't have one, just use foil. So this is going to go in the oven, and I'll be back when it's done cooking and show you just how beautiful it is. Wow, this quiche is beautiful, and it is so tall that it just is. I used one of these things to protect my crust, and it's just lifting it right up off of the pie. So probably about 30 minutes in, I noticed the crust looked the color that I wanted it to be, and I didn't want it to brown anymore. And so I went ahead and put this rim over it, and it kept it exactly the color that it was when I put it on. And you know, I'll have to say this was they say 14 egg quiche. I have so many eggs, and right before I put it in the oven, I thought, you know, I'm going to mix another couple of eggs and I'm going to put it in there. I think I mixed another 4 eggs and I dumped it in there, and look how tall it is. It is so massive, but this used up 20 eggs in this quiche. So that is such a great recipe to have when you've got all those eggs coming in. But I'm going to turn the camera in so you guys can see just how beautiful this is. So maybe let it set for a minute or two and slice it up and serve it, and you guys are going to absolutely love this quiche. That is one massive egg quiche. So I know you guys are going to want to try this. And when I press on it, it's, you know, solid like that. You can tell it springs back. You can tell that that's finished. Well, hopefully you found that helpful. If making a homemade pie crust has kind of been daunting to you and it just looks too hard, or you've tried and you've messed up and it just hasn't worked out, and so you've kind of given up, I hope that you'll reconsider and give it a try. I actually made pie crust for years before I learned the technique of it, and I had a lot of failures. I kept changing the recipe, finding new recipes for pie crust, and nothing would ever work. And I soon realized it wasn't necessarily the recipe, the list of ingredients, it was the technique that I had all wrong. And so I hope that me going over it very slowly and very detailed, it kind of took the question out of a homemade pie crust, and you'll want to give it a try. So don't forget to click the link below to get your own printable recipe of this 14 egg quiche, and I'll also have adjustments if you just want to make a basic 5 or 6 egg quiche in a 9-inch pie plate. So, get your printable recipe so you can do that. And if you enjoyed this, I'd love it if you would give me a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and click that little bell, because I bring so much delicious content to my channel every week, and you're not going to want to miss any of my recipes. So go ahead and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.